Good evening and welcome to tonight's live show. Here we are. It's Sunday. We said we were going to do week 1 of 31 Days of Halloween, a little bit of a different format than what I normally do here on the channel. Um I would be remiss if I didn't mention before we dive into this, before we do our thing, my head is not quite in the right place tonight. Um, I am. I'm thinking about current world events right now, and it's got me really tripped up, really upset. I considered not doing the show at all, and then I thought, no, the show must go on, and so that is what we're doing. The show must go on. We'll do tonight's show. But if I seem a little distracted, that is why. So I'll do my best to remain focused. Um, the way it's going to work tonight, the format. So normally, what I do, and we talked about this in the kickoff show. Normally, what I do is I upload a video every day with a review of whatever movie I watched that day, and that has just been. I've done that 2 years in a row, and it's a real slog. It's not that I don't like doing it. I just figured there's got to be a better way to do this, and maybe it'll allow me to watch more movies. And I think it has, because I watched 10 movies this week. Actually, I watched 13 movies, but I watched 10 movies that were Halloween related and 2 that were not. I took my son to see The Creator, and then I just got back from seeing William Friedkin's Sorcerer, which I had never seen and had the opportunity to see it at the Alamo. How could I pass that up? So 12 movies. 12 we did 12 I did 12 movies. I'm sorry. I did 12 movies this week, but 2 of them were not Halloween related, so we're not going to count them. I'm only going to go through. Now, before we do, and then here's the thing. I'm going to go through my movies, and then once I've gone through my movies, I want to hear what everybody else has been watching. If you care to share, if you want to leave it in the comments, we can talk about it. So I'm going to go through each movie. I'm going to go uninterrupted. Okay. I'm not going to stop for any comments. I'm just going to go straight through. This is my Letterbox profile. Letterbox is a really cool kind of social media where you can see what everybody is watching. You log your films. It allows you to keep track of everything that you're watching. It's really fun. You could follow me there on Letterbox. I put the link is down in the description as well. So check that out if you wish. And I'm just gonna turn my melancholy lower faced mouth line upside down into something a little more cheerful. I like doing this stuff. I don't want to be feeling sad right now. So with that said, the rules again, real quickly. Try to watch a minimum of it has to be one movie for each day of the month. That doesn't mean it has to be a movie a day, or you can miss a day. You could do consecutive. You could do whatever. You could do this. You could do that. Just make sure that you watch at least 31 horror movies in 31 days. I try to always beat that record. I have a feeling we're going to do that this year because, like I said, it's week 1 and I've already watched 10. So I'm feeling pretty good. I'm feeling pretty strong right out of the gate. I'm going to go through my 10 picks and then I'm going to go through the comments. So I'm not going to look at the comments, you guys. I'm going to go through the comments after. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to clip these up. So anybody who, whatever, I'm going to clip these up afterwards. That nobody cares about that. Okay. So here's Letterbox. Here's my Letterbox profile. And this log, see, I rate my movies. I leave little reviews. And I'm just going to go movie by movie and tell you a little bit more about what I thought about them, this, that, and the other. And we'll see how this goes, okay? And then when I'm done, I want to hear from you guys. We'll go to the comments and I'll hear from you guys. Okay, ready? Let us begin now. All right. Here is our first movie of the month, of the season. This is called Play Dead. And it's directed by the editor of Scream, which was a pleasant surprise. I was like, wow, that's really cool. Made me want to watch it even more. Here's what I said. Spotted this on Prime a few days ago and decided to save it for 31 days of Halloween. I was weary of the font on the poster, but I love a great "what are they doing with the dead bodies" hook, as well as Jerry O'Connell. So you can't see it here, but on the poster had a very generic kind of font, and I'm very weary of generic like fonts that don't really, I don't know, if it's the wrong kind of font, it really makes me raise an eyebrow about the movie. It will make me judge the movie with prejudice and potentially not watch it. But again, like I said, Patrick Lussier, is that how you pronounce his last name? Patrick Lussier, who is the editor of all the Scream movies, worked closely with Wes Craven on a bunch of stuff. Brilliant guy in his work as an editor. Plus, you got Jerry O'Connell, and then that's the Scream 2 connection, right? They worked together on that movie. And it's "what are they doing with the dead bodies," which is I love that. There's a bunch of movies like that, just what's going on with the dead bodies. And it usually is, something really morbid or macabre. And this was, your typical organ farming affair. Spoilers. Sorry. Let me keep reading my review. Additionally, it was directed by Patrick, the brilliant editor of the Scream movies. You can really feel the Wes Craven influence in Patrick's direction for the first half, which is a lot of cat and mouse fun, 100%. And when you're watching a Scream movie and someone's being stalked by Ghostface, there's a lot of that sort of feeling in this movie. So if that's something you really like, you're going to enjoy this movie. The premise and motivation coupled with the pedigree gave this film a lot of goodwill right out of the gate. Slowly though, it devolves in tone from riding the already very fine edge of silly and scary into almost goofy slapstick and flies off the rails a bit too much for my personal taste. Overall, very fun. Watch it now on Amazon Prime. Now, what I mean when I say that, I said, it devolves in tone from riding the already very fine edge of silly and scary. It's like, it's just, it's a fine line. It's a thing about comedy and horror, or horror and comedy. And we'll talk about that with another review that I will do later on. You got to be careful, man. The balance has to be right. And if it's not right, it's not going to work. And it really sort of fell apart for me in this one. It just gets really goofy. Especially the end, the end scene. I won't spoil it, but it just did not fit in with how kind of scary the beginning was. There's a little too exposition-y at the beginning as well, but I put that aside. I was okay with that. Overall, lots of fun. Definitely recommend Play Dead. I gave it 2.5 stars out of 5 on Letterboxd. I do rate my movies on Letterboxd. Some people don't. Some people think it's mean. I think it's fair. People rate. Listen, I have 2 feature films on Letterboxd. Actually, I have more than that. And people rate my stuff all the time. And hey, it is what it is. If I'm in the game, if people can rate my stuff, then I can rate other stuff. But listen, very fun. Definitely recommend Play Dead. So that was watch number 1. That's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to go through these and tell you, and then I want to hear from you guys. All right. So my second watch was something. Okay. So this movie is called At the End of 8. And this was another thing that popped up on Prime. The only time I watch trailers is when I am forced to at the movie theater. Otherwise, I'm going in blind, apart from whatever the synopsis reads. Yeah, that's typically true, man. Like sometimes I got to watch the trailers at Alamo Drafthouse, but I will absolutely avoid trailers if I can. I want to go into any movie I've never seen before. I want to be utterly, utterly surprised when I see it. I don't want to know anything about it. I want you to just thrill me or surprise me or make me laugh or shock me in some way, shape, or form, especially if it's horror, right? If it's comedy or something else, I don't mind as much. But horror films, I don't want to know anything. Do not tell me a thing. Okay. IMDb lists the budget of this film, this micro budget film, at $4,500. And I'll tell you something, you can feel it. What do I mean by that? I mean, there are some movies, again, like one of the greatest micro budget movies ever made is The Battery. It was made for $6,000. And I'll tell you, that movie does not feel like it was made for $6,000. That movie feels like it has tens of thousands of dollars thrown at the screen potentially. You know, it's two people in a, outdoor setting, but it just feels so much bigger than the budget size. This, on the other hand, because of certain, aesthetics, because of certain, shortcomings in the quality of the film, you can feel the $4,500. But listen, I love watching micro budget stuff because I like to compare and contrast with my own micro budget work, as I wrote here. I like to see how I like to see how filmmakers execute creativity with limited resources because it gets me charged up. It makes me want to go out there and make movies. And I'll tell you something, for the first half of this movie, again, it was like the first half syndrome. For the first half of this movie, I was charged up. Yes, there were some things that, like, you have to excuse certain things when you're watching micro budget films. And I was able to, there's a lot of stuff I was able to put aside and just I was in the story. It strung me along. This is what I wrote. The filmmaker really manages to set up a pretty good people in a house single location story. So people in a house story is where, especially if you're making a micro budget film, typically you want to try and tell a story in a single location. They call it, it's like two people, single location stories. These are the easiest stories to tell from a filmmaking micro budget perspective. They're easy, the fewer locations and the fewer actors you have, the easier it is to execute. However, it also potentially can be very boring. In the case of At the End of 8, they actually made it, I was quite compelled trying to figure out what was going on initially. I wrote the director also keeps things interesting in the first half of the slow burn that doesn't pay off when things speed up in a direction I didn't want the story to go. So it's a slow burn, meaning that the story is slowly unwinding, and then we hit this point where everything kind of speeds up. There's this event that occurs, and it changes the tone and the feel and the energy of the story. And then the story moves in a direction that I just did not want it to go. I was like, nope, this is not working for me at all. I started to feel a little let down. I'm not going to lie. It kind of let me down. I was not happy. There was just like so many other places my imagination went to, and I'm going, why? The plot is basically a bunch of, it's three people in a house. And they have to stay there for 8 hours to get $10,000 each. It's a game that they play. It's a pretty good excuse to keep people in a house, but it just didn't work, man. So the reveal had me very curious initially, but it left me underwhelmed, which in today's age is problematic. And let me say that again. The reveal, so what ended up being in the movie, had me very curious initially, but it eventually left me underwhelmed, which in today's age is problematic. Sorry, I wrote this wrong. What I meant to say is, additionally, it was also problematic and handled without nuance or sensitivity. So it was doing this, sort of, it was dealing with someone who I don't know how to talk about this stuff anymore. I don't know if the individual was gender fluid or if the individual was a transvestite or what. It was some sort of thing like that. It was very evocative of Psycho in that kind of way, or Dressed to Kill. That sort of stuff, it was not handled sensitively with nuance, and I feel that it suffered greatly for that. It almost could have worked if such consideration had been applied. There was a Billy Loomis from Scream meets Psycho and Dressed to Kill vibe, which makes sense because De Palma loves Hitchcock. and it was trying to muster this. The bottom line is that the first half of the film doesn't feel like it was made by the same director who made the second half of the film. That's true as well. So, I don't know, man. Everybody should go check it out if you want to watch something that's micro budget. It's on Amazon Prime, but I'm warning you, it's definitely it's a little blunt. It's a little insensitive, and it just doesn't handle its characters with the care that I guess they deserve. I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. Like I said, it's streaming on Prime if you want to check it out. And again, anybody who makes a film and completes it, especially for a sum of $4,500, that is a feat in and of itself. It's an amazing thing to be able to do that, and will definitely pique my curiosity to at least check it out. Whether it's good or not is that's another thing, but I don't know, or I should say something that I gravitate towards too. The next thing, then I moved over to Shudder. Okay. So this film is a Shudder exclusive premiere or something. It's called The Angry Black Girl and Her Monster. And I really, really love this. This was the first watch of this season that just really blew me away, man. I mean, I just really friggin' enjoyed it. The Angry Black Girl and Her Monster is a fantastic example of taking timeless literature and building your own unique story perspective on top of its framework. It works so well because these frameworks are universal and represent different facets of the human experience. Case in point, this is a retelling of the Frankenstein mythology, except it's told through the eyes of an angry black girl, basically. And her Frankenstein's monster is actually her brother Chris, who is, I guess, for the lack of a better term, he's involved with gangs. Maybe he's a gangbanger, something like that, and he's murdered. And she's stealing bodies and bringing him to life. And the production design is great. The way that the monster looks great. The brother Chris is the monster, looks great. And like I said, it takes a lot of Frankenstein. It takes Frankenstein tropes. But it's not going beat by beat by the Frankenstein story. Instead, the writing, it's almost like the writing is about the writing has a lot to do with the Black experience in America in certain lower what am I trying to say here? Lower income neighborhoods, right? Some urban neighborhoods, that sort of thing. And it's a POV in horror that we rarely ever see, let alone with Frankenstein mixed in. So I thought it was fascinating. I thought it was great. It felt super fresh in that kind of way. When it comes to horror and science fiction, Frankenstein might be the greatest framework of them all. For the live 31 Days of Halloween review and discussion of Frank Henenlotter's Frankenhooker, Bob Rose and I discussed the notion of the Frankenstein trope. It's sort of an informal set of story criteria that qualifies a movie as being Frankensteinian, including films like She's All That and Jurassic Park. That's right. She's All That follows the Frankenstein trope, as does Jurassic Park. So last year, Bob and I, as we were talking about Frankenhooker, that you could see that on the channel if you want, we talked for about 90 minutes and we started, we just went off the rails just talking about how, like, Frankenstein itself is its own story engine. You know what I mean? The idea. So in order for something to follow the Frankenstein trope, it has to be the following. Creator creates creation. Creation doesn't do what creator wants them to do. Or sorry, the creator has a specific, idea or notion for what they want their creation to be and do, and the creation doesn't follow. The creation always rebels. That's what you need in order to have a Frankenstein story. And of course, things don't go well for what's her name in this movie? Not Victoria. Vicaria. And I like that they use the name Vicaria because it kind of throws you off a little bit. You think that they could have gone with Victoria. Victoria would be the on the nose one, and instead they're going with Vicaria, which is a little bit more subtle, a little bit more hidden in terms of trying to say. And in this story, the father talks about how his descendant was owned by somebody with the initial F, and was branded with the initial F as the result. So making it sound like the descendant of the father of Vicaria is in fact was in fact enslaved by Frankenstein himself, Victor Frankenstein himself. So it's great, man. It's really great. Her Vicaria is a really interesting character. There's a lot of Jeffrey Combs Herbert West in her. Okay. Here, let me just read what it says. The monster looks amazing, and the SFX gore is very effective. The ending is so powerful. It really, really is. And the lessons almost come full circle until they don't. And the lessons are always, it's kind of like the Pet Sematary thing. Sometimes dead is better. It's like when part of the Frankenstein trope is, you're playing, it's man trying to be God and creating something with or using science in a way that they don't truly grasp or master or have the discipline. That's the key. And that's what Jurassic Park really kind of explores, that with Ian Malcolm talking to John Hammond and being like, you don't have the discipline and you didn't earn the power. You figured out how to do it, and you didn't take any consideration to what it really means, and this, that, and the other. All these really big sort of, concepts that you have to grapple with when, you have such, power in science to do something like resurrect the dead or create new life from dead tissue. So the ending, I don't want to spoil it, but the ending is, bringing us towards this theme of like, science, life, and it's life is a mystery, and it's perhaps not meant for humans to master or to solve. And then they totally just break that. They smash that into a million pieces with the ending, and it's great. I'm glad that they kind of did it, because to not have do it, to have gone full circle, which also would have been fine because that's the story of Frankenstein, but to have gone full circle would have been kind of what's the word I'm thinking about? It would have just been like like paint by numbers, and instead they didn't. They did something daring and fresh. There's a lot of Jeffrey Combs Herbert West in the main character Vicaria, especially in a scene that felt like a great nod to what happens early in Reanimator, when West and Dr. Carl Hill, played by the brilliant David Gale, bump heads over a cadaver cranium during a lesson. Dr. Hill is describing how you peel the skull back, the skin off the skull, and cut open the skull and weigh the brain. And Herbert West keeps breaking pencils, and Hill has that line. He says, "Mr. West, I suggest you get a pen." And we get a scene very similar to that. And remember, I was talking about how this is kind of written from the black perspective, black POV. In Angry Black Girl, the scene is void of pencil snapping like in Reanimator, and we are given a POV into racial microaggression and the white women tears Karening against our lead. So she's having the argument about proving her teacher wrong about the fundamentals of what they know about life and death. And security is called on her. She's not being, she's just having a passionate discussion. And because she's angry and also happens to be black, she has security called on her, and she has to be escorted out of the classroom. It's absolutely crazy. But, again, showing what, the black experience is that perhaps, say, others might not be aware of. And so that's what I really did appreciate bringing something new to the story, of bringing a unique original story and building it on top of Frankenstein. My only wish for this film, and probably why I didn't give it a full 5 stars, I would have given it a full 5 stars. My only wish for this film and its story was to give us more pathos and screen time with Chris the monster. His arc feels undernourished. We really don't get a sense of who Chris is. Why is he a monster? What makes him monstrous besides his appearance? He keeps murdering people. He keeps snapping their necks and stuff. We see that he's sort of uncontrollable. He's ungovernable. That's the word I was trying to think of when I was talking about Frankenstein. The notion of what makes Frankenstein, the hook, it's not just bringing something to life, but trying to govern life, trying to control and govern life like you are a god, and finding that it is uncontrollable. So I kind of feel like we didn't really get to see any pathos from the POV of Chris the monster, and that's so key. Part of what makes Frankenstein work is that there's humanity within the monster, right? That's the irony. On the outside, I look like this hideous monster, but on the inside, I'm human just like you. So that was missing immensely. We got to see a little bit of that. But not really. It's funny. The movie tells us that he is a monster because we call him a monster. And I feel, too, that the filmmaker treated him more like a monster lurking in the shadows instead of showing us the humanity of Chris in his new rebirth or in his previous life. Meaning we didn't get any flashbacks to who he was before he died. That would have helped in sort of giving us more pathos. The only thing we get fragments through his pregnant wife. He has a wife who's pregnant with their child, whose name turns out to be Victor, Aisha. She kind of like alludes to him and what he was about, but it wasn't enough for me. I needed more. But listen, either way, I highly, highly recommend this one. Probably one of my number one recommendations. Okay, I have 2 number one recommendations, I would say, in this first week, and that would be one of them. This is streaming on Shudder, as I mentioned, so make sure you check that out. Okay, on to the next movie number 4. Vampire in Brooklyn, directed by Wes motherfucking Craven. Oh, God, my nose is so itchy. Let me take that again. Vampire in Brooklyn from 1995, directed by Wes Craven. This is the movie he made right before he would make Scream. This revisit is a long time coming. I'm not quite sure when I last saw it, possibly in the 90s or the super early 2000s. Overall, the 90s had a seriously great vampire renaissance. And that's true, man. When you look at the 90s, I mean, the 80s had some incredible vampire classics between Lost Boys and Fright Night. And I don't know what else off the top of my head. I'm trying to think from the 80s I mean, really, those are the two. Those are the 2 really, really big ones. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. What from the 80s that was a vampire movie? No, it was like Fright Night, and Fright Night and Lost Boys. Those are, and I guess Near Dark. Near Dark would be another one too. But there's not a lot of them. But then in the 90s comes around, and holy fuck, you have Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula. Bram Stoker's Dracula came out. You had Interview with a Vampire. You had From Dusk Till Dawn, Bordello of Blood. You had Blood and Donuts as a great one. That's a lesser known one, but that's a great one. You have John Carpenter's Vampires. You had that was kind of no, that was pretty people like that movie, but really From Dusk Till Dawn, man. Oh my freaking god! And Bram Stoker's Dracula. You had Dracula Dead and Loving It, Mel Brooks's sort of laugh riot Dracula adaptation. And then on the flip side, you had Wes Craven doing Vampire in Brooklyn with Eddie Murphy and Angela Bassett, man. I mean, what a pedigree that is. It's just amazing how many tons of now iconic and memorable vampire movies came out of the decade, and some of them have remarkable staying power. I think about Bram Stoker's Dracula, Interview with a Vampire, and of course, From Dusk Till Dawn. This was not one of them. Vampire in Brooklyn is actually kind of a panned movie on many different levels. People that like it really like it. It's messy. In fact, it's typically panned across the board. I never personally understood why, but I also haven't seen it in forever. I love Eddie Murphy and I love Wes Craven. It's sort of crazy to me that overall this movie doesn't really gel. It's messy, to say the least. I mean, the story and the characters are all over the place. The movie can't decide on what its tone should be. When you hear about the behind the scenes, it becomes more apparent. It's not widely agreed on whether Eddie Murphy was trying to make comedy horror or Wes Craven was trying to make a horror comedy. And that again, that goes back to what I was saying before. You have to ride that line so fine. Look at how Reanimator does it. Reanimator's comedy, same thing with Return of the Living Dead. How do those movies function as horror comedies or comedy horror films? The performances, the tone is of the utmost serious. Like there's no slapstick in those. There is slapstick, but the slapstick is accidental. The slapstick actually comes by the way of violence, because much like horror and comedy are sort of like a dynamic contrast, so too is slapstick and violence. And same thing with Evil Dead. The original, when you look at the original Evil Dead, it's like these films are laugh out loud funny because of how serious they're being taken, and violence gets pushed to such a level that it becomes funny. It becomes slapsticky, in that kind of way. It becomes over the top, or it's just done with the craziness of it all. When you look at Return of the Living Dead, when you look at some of the scenes in Return of the Living Dead, and you go, it goes from being absolutely terrifying to absolutely hilarious in the craziness of trying to cremate a dead body, and trying to convince a mortician that they're to use their crematorium because they have rabid weasels. Vampire in Brooklyn never finds it. It's a comedy with tons of violence in it. That's really what it is. But it just doesn't work. The scenes don't work. There's no story. The story is so I don't know, discombobulated, man. And so, it's funny. Wes Craven immediately made Scream following this film and perfected the formula in the process. And what helped him to do that was the lessons he learned on Vampire in Brooklyn. By the way, some more incredible vampire films from the 90s. You have Innocent Blood by John Landis, even though John Landis is a piece of shit. More on him in a second. And you also have The Addiction, right? You have The Addiction by Abe Ferreira. Oh, and you have Habit by Larry Fessenden, which we reviewed last year, which blew me away, from 96, which I had never seen. I mean, just so many great vampire films. What I found most interesting is Vampire in Brooklyn is basically Eddie Murphy with a screenplay written by his brother Charlie Murphy remaking Coming to America, but blending it with the story of Dracula. So literally, Vampire in Brooklyn is just Coming to America with vampires. That's the story. That's literally the story. On paper, that should work just fine, except that it doesn't. Three other thoughts came to me while watching this movie. Number one, these are kind of like rhetorical questions too, I would say. Is remaking Coming to America with Wes Craven supposed to be a subtle fuck you to John Landis and their strained relationship? Also, fuck you, John Landis. And if you don't know why I'm saying fuck you, John Landis, just go Google his segment on the Twilight Zone and how he is a piece of human shit. Number two, in a hot take that no one is asking for, Max, played by Eddie Murphy, spoilers, is 100% Rita's father. Rita is played by Angela Bassett. Their race of vampires died out, and desperate Max is trying to seduce his daughter but playing it off like he knew her father in a Return of the Jedi, Obi-Wan Kenobi backtracking his wording to Luke in A New Hope about his father being quote unquote dead, if that makes any sense. So it almost feels like, you know, how like in A New Hope, he's like, yeah, your father was killed by Darth Vader. But then in like Return of the Jedi, Luke's like, why'd you lie to me? And he's like, oh, well, your father was technically symbolically dead, but, you know, he just really transformed, blah, 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 whatever, you know, that sort of thing. And in this movie, it almost, you know, this is just what I surmise from watching it is that Max is the father, but he's trying to play it off like he isn't because he doesn't want to freak out his daughter, and he's trying to jumpstart his vampire race again. I don't know, really weird. Number 3, Kadeem Hardison, who you might also know, who played Dwayne in A Different World, the sitcom from the black sitcom from the 90s, beloved sitcom from the 90s. He plays Julius Jones in full. So him playing Julius Jones, the character in Vampire in Brooklyn, in full ghoul makeup would have also worked smashingly well with Nicolas Cage as Dracula, because Julius Jones is the equivalent of Renfield. And I would have loved to have seen Julius Jones paired up with Nicolas Cage's Dracula in Renfield or some other movie. I think it would have worked really, really well. I would have liked to have seen that. Okay. Up next. Oh my Lord. Oh my Lordy, Lord. Oh man, No One Will Save You. This is streaming on Hulu, and I cannot recommend this enough. Along with The Angry Black Girl and Her Monster streaming on Shudder, this movie and that movie are my 2 number 1 picks for this week. For 31 Days of Halloween, you gotta see this movie. I gotta tell you, man, I am so weird about my aliens. Well, let me just read what I wrote here. I said my tippy top 31 Days of Halloween recommendation at this moment. This exceeded every single expectation I had for it. It left me speechless, just like the movie itself, where only a handful of words are spoken in the entire 90-ish minute runtime. Let me tell you something. It is really hard to make a movie. It is really hard to make a movie with good dialogue. It's even harder to make a movie where there's no dialogue and you are keeping people entertained and entranced with the action on screen. We are presented with masterful visual storytelling that could be shown all over the world to 100 different people who spoke 100 different languages, and they would all be able to tell you what is happening. In the great words of Elric Kane himself, it was, quote unquote, pure cinema. The story is very simple. Girl lives in a house and aliens are after. They are, you know, the gray men styled aliens. This is what I said here. I am very particular about alien invasion, gray man type stuff. Gray men are the type of aliens with the oval heads. Sometimes they're tall, sometimes they're short. They're always skinny, and their skin is gray. I don't find them scary. I don't find them threatening, but they made them very scary and very threatening in No One Will Save You. Which has a double meaning that I will not explain. You just have to watch it and see. I don't want to spoil this at all. It can be very, you know, the thing about gray men stuff as well is that, you know, gray man aliens can be very generic most of the time without a true sense of danger or threat. But No One Will Save You manages to take something we've seen before in the classic Twilight Zone episode and crank up the dial to 11. It was that comparison that eventually sold me on watching it, and I'm glad I did. So what am I referring to? There's a classic episode of Twilight Zone. There's not a word of dialogue is spoken. I have to imagine that this was inspired, that this was inspired in part by that episode. It is a really, really great episode, and it's this woman who's being stalked by little teeny tiny alien robot creatures. And No One Will Save You has a few surprises. It's got a little bit of an Invasion of the Body Snatchers vibe that really helped. The story was a great excuse to weave some exposition. Do you know how hard it is to translate to communicate exposition when you can't just have your characters use dialogue? And the thing is, you could say that using dialogue is lazy to deliver exposition, but you could also say that it is really challenging, because to make it sound good, to make it sound tasteful, is difficult. Can be very, very, very difficult. In any case, everybody go check out Normal Save You. It will keep you on the edge of your seat. I was just enmeshed the entire time. It did not let up for me, and I was glad. I was so glad. Up next, listen, when we get to the end of these, make sure you leave some of your watches in the comments so we can go back and take a look and see what is up. I gave No One Will Save You 5 stars. Vampire in Brooklyn had 2.5 stars. Okay. Next up. All right. So this one was streaming on Hulu as well. It's called The Friendship Game. It came out in 2022. And this was, I'm not going to lie, this was tough. This was a tough one. I understand why the reviews are harsh on this movie. I'd be remiss not to express that it was a frustrating watch from a story perspective. I had no idea what was going on. It was quite difficult to sort of follow everything. The marketing of this film set this movie up to be something that it was not at all. I can't even really tell you what happened. I really can't. Like I literally cannot describe what happens in this movie. A bunch of friends are playing this friendship game that they find at a yard sale. It kind of looks like the Lamentation configuration from Hellraiser. So I'm thinking that there's going to be some like Game of Death style puzzle that's going to go crazy, drive things crazy. I mean, you really could, it's funny. You could do a very simple Hellraiser movie. Kids in the house, they buy the Lamentation configuration from a yard sale, just like this movie. Use the same setup, and then have the kids in the house. They open the box, and the Cenobites come after them in the house. They're trapped in the house because of course you gotta block all the exits so nobody can escape. And then you just have them running around the house trying to escape or solve the puzzle or something. It would work, man. And everybody gets killed one by one, this, that, and the other. I will try to listen. I try my best not to, say negative things on, when reviewing things, or I try to, I'm of the firm believer that, if you have nothing nice to say, then either don't say anything at all, or, be very, expressive, be very descriptive in your reasons why. Don't say something sucks, because things don't suck. Things just are, and you either like them or they don't, or you don't. So the positive thing I will say about this movie is that I absolutely loved the fake Italian horror movie posters and VHS tapes for Bag of Guts, a fictional movie within the movie, as well as the movie within a movie that they watch on TV, which was just perfection. It really did feel like a Italian horror movie from the 80s. I wanted to watch that movie more than I wanted to watch The Friendship Game, if I'm being honest. There was so much love and detail that was poured into the production design for this, and it didn't go unnoticed for me. So anyone who is a genre movie fan will pick up and appreciate all that stuff, as well as the nod to Larry Cohen's The Stuff, except it's just called Goop. So check this out if you like. It's streaming on Hulu. I'm sorry to say that I gave it 1.5 star. Like I said, I found it very frustrating. It was a frustrating watch. I was not picking up what it was putting down. All right, next movie. Oh man, so this one's interesting. Spirit Halloween the movie. This came out in 2022. This was another Hulu. No, not Hulu. This was on Shudder. Okay, this was a Shudder exclusive. and it stars, quote unquote, I say quote unquote, it stars Christopher Lloyd, although it's hard to even say that because he's barely in the movie. Um, and it's a movie that is inspired by Spirit Halloween stores, and it's like, duh. In a world where we get a Halloween movie about everything, I saw Angus McCorder on here before mention the Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey movie. You know, we have Winnie the Pooh horror movies. Like, why can't we have a Spirit Halloween horror movie? We have a What about the Goosebumps? And that's what I figured this would kind of be. I figured this would kind of fall into like the Goosebumps style horror movie, scary movie, Halloween, more Halloween movies. Halloween movies are different from horror movies and scary movies. Halloween movies might have supernatural or genre related things, but they're more like they're fun, lighthearted, family-friendly movies that you could watch with younger kids if you want. They generally take place on Halloween and deal with Halloween type things, you know, and they don't rely on, you know, death, guts, murder, and disembowelment, that sort of stuff. So here's what I had to say about Spirit Halloween, the movie. A fun size, quote unquote, bit of Goonies horror, like, you know, the Goonies, the movie. It's Goonies horror or Goonies Halloween fun that you can watch with the kids or the family if you want. There was way too much emphasis on Christopher Lloyd in the marketing when we didn't get nearly enough. So he's right on the poster, even not on this poster, but on other posters. I mean, they really pimped out that Christopher Lloyd was in this movie. And it would have been nice to have some goofy Casper Ghost style Christopher Lloyd face instead of a CGI Spirit Electron and some generic possessed Halloween decorations. Because that's what happens. These three, you know, you got three kids doing their Goonies slash Stephen King Stand By Me sort of, you know, adolescent, you know, growing up type stuff on Halloween, that sort of deal. And they decide to spend the night in a Spirit Halloween store. Just like, you know, it's like, hey, what would you do? Where would you go if zombies were taking over the world? You'd go to the mall, a la Dawn of the Dead. Where would you go? Where's a great place to hang out on Halloween? The Spirit Halloween store, because we're going to do all sorts of, you know, the costumes and decorations, and we'll have a lot of fun. But Christopher Lloyd is a CGI Spirit Electron. When I say electron, I mean like electrons, like the little microscopic things. You know, he's just floating around and possessing Halloween decorations, but they're not like, you know, they're not like fun, interesting ones. They're just super generic. And I figure that he probably did 2 days on this movie. One of which was a bunch of dialogue for said possessed Halloween decorations, because Lloyd wasn't actually on the screen. We just heard his voice. A bigger budget might have gotten us that Casper Lloyd I was mentioning. I do believe that Christopher Lloyd does provide the voice of one of the ghosts in that Casper movie that came out in '96 with Christina Ricci and Devon Sawa. Don't quote me on that. Bill Pullman as well. So we might have gotten that Casper Lloyd, as well as maybe a license to use Freddy, Jason, Chucky, or maybe Wolfman, Dracula, and the Mummy, etc., to take it into Monster Squad territory. Because, like I said, we kind of got this Goonies. That's what I should have added to at the beginning. It's, you know, Goonies, Stand By Me, Monster Squad sort of vibe going on. And if you had Dracula and Frankenstein and the Mummy, or you had Freddy, Jason, and Chucky, that would have worked. You know, where Christopher Lloyd, that's Christopher Lloyd's Army of Darkness, and the kids are going up against that instead. That would have worked really well. All in all, it's a fun piece of Halloween fluff. That's what I said. And I gave it 3 stars on Letterboxd. And, you know, it was okay. It was okay. There could have been, they could have done more with it. They could have amped up the production design a little bit more to make it feel even more Halloweeny than it did. Like, you know, on a scale of like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of like a film that doesn't have a lot of Halloween stuff, even though it takes place on Halloween, all the way to Who Be Halloween. That's right. The Adam Sandler movie, Who Be Halloween, is just drenched in Halloween, like fun. You know what I mean? Same thing with Hocus Pocus, for that matter. Okay, let's move on to the next movie. We're almost at the end, and we will go to your films. Oh boy. All right. So I feel like this review is not going to be much different from my last review for a VHS movie, which I did last year. We had VHS 99, which is my personal favorite yet. I love this franchise. We have a decade now of VHS movies. I think there are 5 or 6. I hope they never stop making them. Here's the thing. Anthology horror is my favorite. I always try to squeeze a few in during an October watch. You really can't go wrong. And you really can't go wrong with the VHS franchise, as I mentioned. And somehow they seem to get better and better with each entry. You know, standout segments had to be the wraparound, as well as the 2 that were interconnected in a very clever way. I don't want to say what exactly that was if you haven't seen it, but basically the first segment and that segment, the second to last segment, I think it was, they're perfect. The way that they complement each other so well. I really hope that they make a VHS film for every year from 77 to 2006, because I think that's really, from 77 to 2006 is the real span of the VHS age, right? How cool would a 77 VHS film be? I feel like you have to do something around a punk band. Maybe you do something about the Misfits. Oh man, how cool would that be? That would be fun. That would be fun. 1983. I mean, there's so many great years, so many distinctions, so much you could do. So much. VHS 91 would be good. I really do. I really do like all the VHS films. Each one has at least 1 to 3 segments that are just spectacular, a minimum. And what's great about them too is they always have like 5 or 6 stories. I love anthology horror. I hate it when it's just 3 stories. I feel like you need to have 4 or 5 to get a real good bang for your buck. You don't want to have too many. Sometimes, you have something like Tales from Halloween, which I like, but the stories there's just so many friggin' stories, and it's like they're too short. It doesn't feel like a film anymore. It feels more like I don't know, just sort of stitched together compilation. But again, what I loved most about VHS 85 is that, besides the wraparound is what makes it cohesively feel that's what makes any anthology feel like a feature-length film. What I really, really loved about VHS, about this one, is that the stories themselves were interconnected, but not like Trick or Treat, which I think is too interconnected. Trick or Treat tries to do more of like a Pulp Fiction thing, and it kind of works. I don't know. Highly recommend it. I gave it 4 stars out of 5. It's streaming on Shudder. Do not miss VHS 85. That's my birth year, baby. So, it's a good one. It's a good one. All right. Pet Sematary Bloodlines. Okay. Pet Sematary Bloodlines from 2023. This just came out on Paramount Plus. All right. So check it out. Much like we talked about No One's Gonna Save You or whatever, I had very, very low expectations for this one. I was kind of rolling my eyes, just like, come on, what is this gonna be? Am I gonna like it? I didn't realize that this is not a prequel to the original Pet Sematary films. You have Pet Sematary, Pet Sematary 2, and then you have Pet Sematary, the remake that came out. This is a prequel to that. Okay. So that's like it's more in that world than in the original Pet Sematary world. Here's the thing. I'm kind of weary of prequels in general for a few reasons. Okay. They typically tell us a story that we already know the conclusion to and give us answers to questions that we never asked nor needed to ask. So that's a thing. It's like we're already seeing the questions that a prequel is answering are already being answered in the movie that they're a prequel of. You know what I mean? To an extent, I don't need to know the story. In fact, I don't need to know the story behind the story. In fact, it's like leave it to my imagination. Let it like just like simmer in my brain. Like a great example is, the thing that I love about the monologue, the short monologue, the speech in Blade Runner, considered to be one of the greatest science fiction monologues of all time. is when Roy Batty, played by the brilliant Rutger Hauer, he's talking about seeing C beams glittering in the dark, or watching the something on fire off the shoulder of Orion, and it's like he talks about these things that we can't possibly imagine off on some distant world, like the things that he has seen. And yet we don't cut to the things that he's seen. We just sort of have to imagine them ourselves, and it makes them so epic and awesome. So it makes, by him telling us about these things that are epic and awesome that we can't see, it gives like a real gravitas and impact to what he is saying in that moment. To show us it would almost cheapen it. You know what I mean? And additionally, it's like, again, we don't need to know. We don't need to know why C beams are glittering off a Hauser's gate or whatever. No, C beams glittering off of the shoulder of Orion and something at Hauser's gate. I don't remember. Beautiful language, beautiful soliloquy like language, and we just don't need to see it. I don't need a whole movie. As cool as it would be, I don't need a movie of Roy Batty, by Hauser's gate. I don't need it. All I needed is him talking about it in that monologue. On the flip side, Quint doing his monologue in the Indianapolis speech in Jaws, which is considered, again, much like the Blade Runner thing we were just talking about, the Indianapolis speech is one of the greatest monologues ever written in the history of cinema. It's a legendary thing all of its own. We could do a whole podcast about it. I'm not going to podcast about it right now. We've talked a little bit about it in the past. But the story that he tells is essentially this contained sort of thing that could work as its own movie. It's far enough removed. Here's the thing, like backstories like that are told to us because they inform the choices that the characters are making, in the present, in the moment of the story that you're in. However, sometimes the stories are so fascinating, so harrowing, so impactful that you could tell a contained sort of spin-off about said thing. So the idea of Quint starring in an Indianapolis movie, which they tried to make for years and never successfully did, I think would actually kind of work. Do I need it? No, not at all. But if they made it, would it pique my curiosity? Would I want to check it out? Yes, I think I would. And that really brings us to what I want to say about Pet Sematary Bloodlines, which is entirely based on a single chapter from the book, Pet Sematary. And it's mentioned in the movie. We see a whole flashback of this when, what's his face? Playing Judd. John Lithgow is telling us what happened all those years ago. And now they've really, really fleshed it out. They sort of updated things. It takes place during in 1969 with a Vietnam vet, and it's actually pretty interesting. And I found myself quite surprised. It ended up hooking me in, even though we've seen some of this story in the remake that it's connected to. It fleshes it out in this really great self-contained story, and it comes to its natural conclusion. The natural conclusion is that Judd moves into that house, and we now know why he moves into that house next door to where eventually the whatchamacallits will move in, and where Gage's family will move in, and sort of informs his purpose there. But it doesn't really line up, and that's the other problem with prequels, is sometimes they in an effort to flesh out everything that's happening and make it into something bigger than it was in the original, it then doesn't quite fit the sort of story agency in the movie it is trying to service. So, for instance, John Lithgow tells the father, I forget his name, that he can resurrect his child, at the pet cemetery. Basically tells him that he could do this. This story, the Judd in Pet Sematary Bloodlines would never do that. The Judd in Pet Sematary Bloodlines would not ever, no matter the situation, because they know, especially after everything that they went through and all the death that they witnessed, would never allow that. So again, it kind of contradicts itself as a point. In fact, when I think about that out loud and I'm saying it, I'm actually editing my okay, this movie is, I'm taking this down to 3 stars. This is three. I'm giving it 3 out of 5 stars instead of 3.5 because I really do think that really does sort of hurt the story. Great. It hurts the story a lot. One thing that was really interesting about the story that I was not expecting that it did a great job with, horror and science fiction are great vehicles for exploring all sorts of social issues. In addition to, just humanity, right? Um, this film does a great job of exploring allegories of post-traumatic stress disorder as a result of going to the Vietnam War, being shell-shocked, that sort of thing, as well as mental illness and dealing with family members who enable such illness to continue unchecked. Because a lot of times when someone who's mentally ill and off their medication that maybe allows them to function or keeps them from having their brain rot and melt, because that's what happens to some people with, mental illness. Their brain is literally decaying. They don't sleep at night. If they have like schizoaffective disorder, like, I mean, it's bad, man. It can be really freaking bad. And what ends up happening is sometimes those people with mental illness, they don't want to get help for themselves. They don't want it because they don't like the way the medication makes them feel. They put on weight, they feel like a zombie. There's like a lot of reasons. It's very complicated, very nuanced, very, difficult, problematic, situation. It's like on one hand, I don't want to be a zombie. I don't want to gain weight. I don't want to feel like dead inside. On the other hand, I literally can't take care of myself and I might be a danger to myself or to other people. I could harm myself. I could harm other people. You know, it's just it's complicated. So it was very interesting to see David Duchovny protecting his son Timmy, who comes back from the Vietnam War and you know unalives himself and is brought back. All the motivations are there. It totally works. That's sort of the setup of the story. And then he's protecting his son. He's protecting his son who was a danger to everybody around him. And that is what I'm thinking about when I think about that. So that's the allegory that I saw. And I just thought it was really, really sort of, it was there. It was there. And it had a good impact. So I amend my rating of Pet Sematary Bloodlines to 3 stars out of 5. Absolutely check it out. Another film that did exceed my expectations for it. And like I said, I don't know if it really needs to exist. Am I glad I saw it? Yeah, because I like Stephen King and I like the Pet Sematary. I like Pet Sematary, and if we're not going to if we didn't get a prequel, we would just get a sequel, and a sequels have their own problems in the same way that prequels have their own problems. So I don't know this, that, or the other. What is next? Okay, our final movie. This is movie number 10. Once Bitten from 1985. I have a deep, deep, deep love for this cable staple I watched incessantly growing up. And I had such a crush on Karen Coppins, who plays his girlfriend. I'm trying to remember her name now why can't I just watch the movie? How do I not remember her name in the story? Now I have to check. God damn it. What is her name? What is her name? This is going to really bother me. All right, whatever. In any case, Jim Carrey plays a guy named Mark, okay, and he wants to lose his virginity, and he ends up getting, involved with a countess who is a vampire, and she needs the blood of a virgin. Just a lot. Thank you, Amy. It was Robin. Yeah, Karen Copkins is I don't know what it is about her. I so dreamy to me. And that is not, like I said, I had such a crush on her, and that has not changed one bit with the late night revisit that I had last night. The movie itself is such a lighthearted and fun film with its 80s teen Porky's sensibilities. Even though, look, that stuff has not aged well. And there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot. If you go watch any of those 80s high school comedy movies, there's just a lot of problematic stuff. But whatever, man. We know this. We know the context of this. So Mark, and it's funny too. I never realized this when I used to watch this film all the time. It's like Mark is kind of a dirtbag, man. He's got this friggin' piece. Karen got like this perfect girlfriend in Robin. She's like the perfect high school girlfriend, and he's like off trying to score because she's just not ready. Which is all the typical, again, 80s teen social politics, right? A lot of quirky stuff. What's great about these films too? They're just so effortless to watch, man. They're just so effortless. I threw this on. It's not a chore. The movie, I don't know if this makes any sense. The movie watches itself. You know what I mean? You throw it on, and before you know it, like literally 30 minutes have passed. And I was ignoring all the comments, but I'm going to highlight one more comment because it was literally going to talk about what I'm about to say, in that, yes, Once Bitten is very similar to My Best Friend is a Vampire, another movie they literally could make for its own genre of high school teen vampire movies. By the way, there's also Rockula. We were talking about 80s vampire movies earlier, and we were talking about Vampire in Brooklyn. And Rockula is another one from the 80s. And My Best Friend is a Vampire, another one from the 80s. So the 80s had some vampire films. But when you compare the 80s to the 90s, even though Fright Night is one of the greatest vampire films ever made, it just, pound for pound, I'd say that the 90s just outweigh the 80s, man, when it comes to vampire films. Why was I looking? I was looking over there at that poster. I thought I had a vampire poster up. I don't. This is just great, man. And she has Sebastian is her is basically, her gay black butler. Sebastian is my favorite character. He's so wonderful, and he's such a good companion. He's such like just a reliable, like, companion type guy. I don't know. I really enjoyed Sebastian this time around. I really appreciated him. And he was just he was just added so much to every scene that he is in. I was looking up the actor. He died in 1992, which is such a shame. Great actor. I don't know his name off the top of my head. I feel like a giant asshole. I think his name was, it was Cleavon Little was his name. He was in a bunch of stuff. He's in Blazing Saddles. He's in Vanishing Point. He's in Fletch Lives. He's in FM, the movie. He's in a bunch of stuff, man. He's in a bunch of stuff. Okay. So anyway, Once Bitten. So, and then the other thing I have to talk about, so important when it comes to Once Bitten, the dance scene. This is one of the great 80s dance scenes of all friggin' the 80s, man. It is so good. Hands up, he belongs to me. Hands up. Du, 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 du. Oh, it's so good. It is so good. This countess shows up to a high school dance. By the way, he totally lies to her. He's like, I'm 21 studying engineering, working on the acid rain problem. Totally lying. He's a high school kid. He's in high school. They're both in high school. She goes as Jill, and he's not going as anybody. He's just dressed in black. Jim Carrey is gothic vampire. Jim Carrey is fucking cool as hell. And then they do this dance routine, and it just comes out of nowhere. It's so random. I guess it fits the tone of the movie, but it is so much fun. And Jim Carrey plays electric guitar with his leg. And, again, it's just, it remains flawless, and the performances are incredible, and the choreography is incredible, and the way that they go back and forth. Jim Carrey is like a rubber band between the two of them, going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And Karen, aka Robin, she starts like stripping off her stuff, man, and she's wearing this, like, I'm sorry, I sound like such a lecherous old man with this shit. I feel like a fucking weirdo talking about this stuff, but I can't not say it. She's just very like yummy in that fucking like white, like, thing that she wears. It's just, I just loved it. I love it, love it, love it. It made me feel young again to watch it. I'm about to turn 38. I'm not super old, but I don't know. It's just weird. But that's something I loved when I was a kid. That was one of those movies. I was like, humana. There's just something so wonderful about, 80s high school dance scenes in general. They just look like a wholesome good time, especially the one that's in this film where everybody's dancing. Like, everybody dances like this in the 80s. And I just want to be there. Like, okay, maybe I'm like high school age. I want to be at that high school dance, just dancing like this for fun. You know what I mean? That's all. Once Bitten, I gave it 4 out of 5 stars on this revisit from the year of my birth, 1985. And that leaves us. So I've watched 10 movies. Okay. Now, before we go to what movies, we're checking in with you guys now. I've done all my movies. I want to check in with you guys. What movies have you been watching? We'll go back through the comments. What has everybody been watching for Halloween? And before we do, let's go to our sponsor, riotstickers.com. That's right, riotstickers.com, the official sponsor of the Frumess channel. You can get 1,000 stickers for $79. That is an unbelievable deal. The link is down in the description. Go to riotstickers.com/Frumess, FRUMESS, and order your design. We can't go wrong. Look, Riot Stickers printed up the shirt that I'm wearing here. They printed up this banner. Riot Stickers, they are the best. Riot Stickers, they are the bomb. Make sure you order your stickers today. Let's play the theme song, and then we'll check in with everybody's watches. Put your watches in the chat, people. Put your watches in the chat.
Posters and promo cards, there's nothing we can't print for you. From stage backdrops to bass drum heads, we can print on shirts, we can print on hats, we can print on pants. Cheap prices and high quality, quick turnaround times and free shipping. We also offer free artwork support, great customer service, and so much more. We are the bomb. Riotstickers.com. Riot Stickers, we are the bomb. Riotstickers.com. Riot Stickers, we are the bomb. Riotstickers.com. Riot Stickers, we are the bomb.
Okay, and we're back. Okay, just before we look at all your guys' stuff, make sure to come and follow me on LinkedIn. Link is down in the description or in the chat. See what I'm posting. Also, thank you for all the skulls that I saw in the comments earlier. Please make sure you leave me some skulls down in the comments or in the live chat. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe, especially subscribe to the channel. Check everything out. Let's take a look now at what people have been saying here, checking in. I know Biz was talking about some stuff that she had watched and whatnot. Angus is here. Biz says, my 5 Halloween movies this week were Coraline, Captain Clegg. Oh, you watched the Hammer. Way to go, Biz. Captain Clegg and the Night Creatures, Night of the Ghouls, House on Haunted Hill remake, and Scream. Excellent choices. Biz says Coraline was good. It was my first time seeing it, but my daughter had seen it before. Yeah, Coraline is a lot of fun. I saw it in the theater. That was directed by the same director, Henry Selick, who did Nightmare Before Christmas, as well as James and the Giant Peach. Captain Clegg and the Night Creatures was okay. Night of the Ghouls was hokey and weird, but decently entertaining. And I always liked The House on Haunted Hill in 1999. Yes, which also features a cameo from Jeffrey Combs is in that. He plays the doctor in The House on Haunted Hill. And you also have what's his face? Not Jeffrey Rush. Is it Jeffrey Rush? No, yeah, Jeffrey Rush is in it as well. It's a really, really fun. That's a really fun movie. That I would pair that with 13 Ghosts that came out in 2001, that remake with Tony Shalhoub and Matthew Lillard as well. Biz says, I never liked Scream, but it was my daughter's pick for the week. It's still as unengaging and lame as it was back then. I'm shocked. I'm shocked for you to say that. I love Scream. It's one of my favorites. Maybe it'll grow on you one day. I don't know, man. I don't know what to tell you. It is great. She likes the Scream movies though. Saturday the 14th. Gummo Dude, Saturday the 14th was from the 80s, I think. I don't know if I would call that it's not a straight vampire film though. The Return of the Living Aaron. Dan says, I just finished Pet Sematary Bloodlines. It was pretty good. I probably like the remake of the original a few years ago a bit better. I don't know if you can compare them. I mean, they're apparently, accordingly, they're supposed to, go together. Although I think the Judd, like I said, I think the Judd in Bloodlines would never, ever tell the things that he tells to his neighbor in the Pet Sematary film that, happens years later. Just, I don't know. Amy says it's a cash grab to have prequels, unfortunately. Mostly, yes, Amy. You're right. Ultimately, we just don't need it. Here's to swimming with bold-legged women. My old stepdad used that as a blessing before dinner when I was a kid. I always laughed pretty hard. I think Dan is referring to Quint there. Yeah, no fair. That's Gage. That's in the original Pet Sematary. I definitely prefer the original Pet Sematary to the remake. I think Pet Sematary 2 is my favorite. If I had to rank them, it would go Pet Sematary 2, Pet Sematary. The Pet Sematary 2 is not only is it a really good sequel, it's a really good movie. Like, really good. Yeah, fucking Robin, dude. She was the best. Oof. Eric also thinks that Once Bitten was awesome. I'm not wearing a costume. Yeah, he says that a bunch. That was a running gag from Jim Carrey. Eric says, my best friend is a vampire, was shot locally to me, and my older brother was a background extra. That's pretty cool. It just got re-released on Blu-ray. So check that out. I love Teen Wolf, dude. Teen Wolf is also great. One of my a band that's very near and dear to my heart that I've had on the channel, Wolfface. They, Michael J. Wolf, they wrote an album, a concept album, I guess, about Teen Wolf. It's called Still Son of a Bitch. I've listened to this album like hundreds of times. I recommend everybody check it out. Yeah, Alex, I appreciate your sentiment. I mentioned it. I spoke very briefly at the beginning. It's a bummer, man. It's a bummer. A lot of people have died. I don't want to talk about it on this stream. Believe me, I have plenty to say. If you follow me on Instagram, check my stories. I'm talking about it all over there. I really want to keep this stream about Halloween movies. But Alex, I do agree with you, and I appreciate you mentioning that. Thank you. Dan says, I always watch Sleepy Hollow every year, the 1949 cartoon version. Yeah, I watch the 1949 cartoon version every year. It is a tradition. I've been doing it for about 11, 12 years now. Aaron says, Chopping Mall, Happy Robots, Murdering Peeps. Yeah, we watched Chopping Mall. I think that was last year or the year. No, it was last year we did Chopping Mall. I was hanging out with the writer from Chopping Mall because my film played with Chopping Mall at the Sleepy Hollow International Film Festival, the second annual one. Was that yeah, that was last year. Chopping Mall is a lot of fun. Really, really fun movie. Dan says, I just bought the Critters 4 movie pack at Walmart yesterday. That is a really great time. And Critters 4 is goofy and fun as hell. If I had to rank the Critters movies, I think I would do Critters 2, Critters 4, Critters 1, Critters 3. If I had to rate those all. Aaron says he's watched Silver Bullet, Ghoulies, Critters. Great, great, great films. Excellent. Amy, what is Amy watching? Amy is watched Deadly Friend, which I think isn't that Wes Craven, Amy? Demons, Exorcist Believer. How was Exorcist Believer? I skipped that one. Dawn of the Dead, excellent, and Night of the Creeps, fantastic. Ghoulies is like pre-Pokemon. Oh man, Pod is doing Eraserhead tomorrow. Pod, I have to tell you, I had such a great screening of Eraserhead on 35 millimeter at the Alamo. And what's amazing is you can't see it on the DVD version or even the Blu-ray version. At the very end, when everything like goes super bright, you can see Jack Nance in the bright light. You can only see that on the 35 millimeter print. It's so crazy. Eraserhead's a great movie. Eraserhead is weird because you would definitely find it if there was no cult section in a video store. It would end up being in. Oh shit! You just lost me for a minute. If what I was trying to say before about Eraserhead being like horror adjacent, if there was no cult section in a video store in like the 80s, you would find Eraserhead in the horror section. That's where they would put it. Aaron says Paranormal Activity marked one. I've never seen a single paranormal activity movie. They just don't. I don't know, man. Just not interested. Does not. I don't know. Eric says I will have to scoop up the Blu-ray, and I just emailed you an MP3. Okay. I will check my email. I still have to tally up the t-shirts. My emails are all piled up. Critters is great. Critters is great. Dan says, I'm just starting the Dunwich Horror from 1970 with Dean Stockwell. I've never seen it, but I know what it is. I'm a big H.P. Lovecraft fan, not a fan of his racist views. Who isn't? I also love H.P. Lovecraft, despite the fact that he was racist. Amy, I could have told you that. This is speaking as a guy. You know, it's funny, Amy. I was at watching Sorcerer tonight, which is William Friedkin's film that he made after The Exorcist. That was his follow-up film. Was Sorcerer, I believe. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was his follow-up film, and then he made Cruising. So, yeah, I don't know, man. I was like, I don't need to see this Exorcist film. Was not interested at all. Donnie and Marie Christmas special. That's a scary one. Okay. So I'm going to wrap it up, guys. Thank you so much for checking in. Dan says the Pope's Exorcist was pretty cool. So here's what we're going to do. Another week of watching. And next Sunday, we will be back to check in. And we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to review my movies, talk about them, and then you guys will check in with your movies. And if you're enjoying this format, let me know. Because I think it's a lot easier to do this than to review each individual movie and put it up. It's just so much extra work. This is a lot less work. And so far, I think I'm happy with it. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. In any case, thank you so much for joining me. Like always, peace, hair grease, and we will see you next time.